In the last Cosmic Dance, I gave you a sort of history of Collet House and its different traditions and how they'd sort of come together at this one place. And also I talked quite a bit about the old approach from Mr. Uspensky, which was described as bottom-up, and the different approach from Advaita, which was described as top-down, and how Mr. Uspensky and Dr. Rolls both wanted us to understand how to turn it all around and see it from the top down. So in this part of Cosmic Dance, I'm going to attempt to explain the inexplainable and talk about non-dualism. But first of all, if you look back sort of through history, it's almost like there's this great underground river which runs down through history, or you could call it the Great Ocean, and there's all these different wells that go down into the Great Ocean at different times in history. And so there's so many wells. There's a Zen Buddhist well and a Taoist well and a Sufi well and a Christian well, and so many different traditions. And if you go right down to the bottom of the well, then you realise your oneness with the Great Ocean. And also, you can go down any well you like, because there's infinite number of wells. And once you realise your identity with the Great Ocean at the bottom of the well, then you understand all the metaphors in all the different wells, because each well has its own set of metaphors which relate to this realisation of oneness. So bear that in mind. And the other thing about this teaching is it's so devastatingly simple. It's so simple that almost everyone misses it, because we're all looking for something which is complex and remote and esoteric, whereas this is absolutely staring you in the face, as Schnuffy down there clearly knows. So I'm going to take a run at it. The other thing about non-dualism really is that it's very difficult to explain in rational language, because it's a model of direct experience, isn't it, Schnuffy? You come over here, little fella.
Oh, you know it's so
yes, that is exciting. That is exciting, Schnuffy. Oh. Oh, you enjoy yourself, Schnuffy. So anything I say, don't believe it unless you verify it in your own experience.
Okay.
And meanwhile, Schnuffy, if I get boring, you can entertain them. So, the whole essence of non-dualism, it really means that everything is not two. So it implies that there's just one, there isn't two. In dualistic models, you have two and a multiplicity. So you have good and evil, and God and the devil, and all sorts of different dualisms. But with non-dualism, everything is perceived as the manifestation of one consciousness, or one undivided whole, isn't it, Schnuffy? You understand that, don't you? Yeah, I mean you did.
Yeah.
So it's like the whole manifest universe, all the 200 billion galaxies or more expanding in space, are all the manifestation of the one mind, and so are we. And there are several metaphors you can use to help understand that. And one of them, there's one that both Rumi and the American philosopher called Ken Wilber use. And in the analogy, it's like the one mind, the one consciousness, wants to have a game of checkers or a game of chess or a game of backgammon. So, as there's only one of it, it's very difficult to have a game of any game at all, because you need other people to be in the game. So take the example of playing checkers. The one mind is on one side of the board and it makes its move, it moves its counter, and then it has to run round the other side of the board to make the opposing move. But if it makes the opposing move, remembering that it's a one mind, then there's no game, because you're always going to cancel yourself out, because you always know what move you're going to make. So what the one mind does in the game of checkers is when it moves around the other side of the board, it has to forget its true identity. So it forgets who it is, it forgets that it's the one mind, and then it can make the opposing move, and then it goes back around the other side of the board and remembers it's the one mind, and then it makes another move, and that way the game is able to continue as a game. And using that analogy, all of us are the one mind playing the great game of life, but in forgetfulness of our true nature. So it's all like one enormous cosmic dance, where the one mind is dancing all the different roles which are us, but in forgetfulness of who we really are. And the forgetfulness of your true nature is all a part of it. It's not an accident or something which has gone wrong or shouldn't have happened. It's how the dance of life manifests and unfolds. If you immediately knew your true identity, then there'd be no drama and no dance and no game. Ken Wilber used an analogy, he used a metaphor. He said, if you're asked why have a creation, and he used the phrase, because it's no fun having dinner alone. So when you're having dinner, you want to go out with a nice person to have dinner with, and it's just the same with consciousness. Being the one undifferentiated consciousness might get a bit boring, so you need to manifest as a creation in time and space for the purposes of the drama and of the dance. So I love that analogy, because it's such a good metaphor of how what we are and how we're all dancing in this great dance, and how at our deepest identity we're all exactly the same. If you go behind your psyche, behind your thoughts and feelings, there's something already looking out through your eyes which is totally universal and not individual. So, as Helen was saying in the ceremony today, when you bow across the skin, you're seeing the divine in the other person. So ultimately you're bowing to yourself. So it's consciousness perceiving consciousness in the other person. And the whole ceremony is an illustration of this great circular dance of life, or of manifestation. And there's another brilliant Rumi metaphor which I adore. It's one of my very favourite Rumi metaphors, and it's about this particular man who lived in Baghdad, and yes, Schnuffy it is, and he kept dreaming that there was this great treasure in a particular house in Cairo, and he had the dream so often that eventually he sets off from Baghdad to Cairo, where he's dreamt there's this great treasure hidden in the basement of this particular house in Cairo, and he has all these adventures trying to get to Cairo, and when he gets there he starts walking around on the streets trying to find the house, and suddenly he bumps into a man who lives in Cairo, and he tells the man about his dream and about the house and about the treasure. And the man from Cairo says, well, that's a bit of a coincidence, because I keep having this dream that there's this great treasure hidden in this particular house in Baghdad. And the man from Cairo describes the house in Baghdad, And the man from Baghdad recognises that it's his own house that is being described. So he goes back home to Baghdad and he searches down in the basement, and sure enough, there is the great treasure all the time in his own house. But unless he'd made the journey from Baghdad to Cairo, he'd never have come to the realisation that he already possessed exactly what he was looking for. So that story again is like a metaphor of the cosmic dance of life, because all of us already are the one consciousness. It's not anywhere else, it's not remote, it's not hidden. It's already fully visible as what is looking out through your eyes right now. It's not even a special state which has to be attained. It's right here, right now, in yourself, and in everything that you perceive. But because of the dance of life and the drama and the nature of forgetfulness, it's necessary that we have to have this great adventure in life where, like the man from Baghdad, we go off looking for something. We know something's missing, and we go off on this great circular journey looking for it. And so you go off into life and you have all these adventures and eventually, because of the great journey, you eventually come to the realization, once you exhaust the search, that you have it already. So that's another wonderful metaphor from Rumi for the dance of life. Another metaphor he gives is a story about the fish in the sea who wanted to know, got really interested and wanted to know about this stuff called water and where he could find it. So in the end, the poor fish swims off on the journey to try and find this stuff called water, not realising that he's already is it and is fully absorbed by it. Isn't that so Schnuffy? So any comments on that so far?
Is the absolute of God in some way incomplete that he has to?
No. Totally complete at every minute. It's just for the, as I understand it, for the purpose of the dance. The dance is for the dance's sake. So, if you go dancing, you normally go dancing because you love dancing. And I paint things because I just love painting. And I go off looking for dinosaur bones because I just love looking for dinosaur bones. So, it's not a model where you're sort of travelling to somewhere to get something because you're incomplete or anything's incomplete. It's more a model just of experience and being for the sake of itself. So it's not even something's missing and you've got to go and find it, or something's incomplete. It's just, at first it appears like that, but then later you notice that it's just, life is just for dancing. And each of us has our own particular dance. There's some unique talent we each have, which is unique in the cosmic dance. There's a couple of bits I wanted to read you. I meant to read them at the beginning, which for me sum up the teaching. And the first thing is just one sentence which I wrote, which I thought if I could explain the whole teaching in a sentence, how would I put it? And I put, everything is consciousness, everything is the dance. And then there's another bit I love from a Persian poet called Sayyid Nizamoglu, who lived in the 16th century, and it's called The Path of Amazement. And it goes, I cannot say who it is I am, I am amazed, I am amazed. I cannot call this self myself. I am amazed, I am amazed. Who is in my eyes seeing? Who is in my heart enduring? Who is inhaling and exhaling? I am amazed, I am amazed. Who is speaking with my tongue? Who is listening with my ears? Who is understanding with my mind? I am amazed, I am amazed. Who is stepping with these feet? Who is tasting with my mouth? Who is chewing and who swallowing? I am amazed, I am amazed. Who holds these riches in his hand? Who is the one throwing them away? Who is buying and who selling? I am amazed, I am amazed. Why is there life coursing below my skin? Why are my eyes bloodshot from crying? Why this religion? Why this faith? I am amazed, I am amazed. O Sayyid Nizamoglu, hear this. Everything comes from the One. Abandon yourself to this mighty beauty. I am amazed, I am amazed. And then the same thing is said here by the 8th century Indian teacher who introduced Buddhism to Tibet, and his name was Padmasambhava, also known in Tibet as Guru Rinpoche. And he says the same thing in his own language. And it's called the wondrousness of these teachings. This self-originated clear light, eternally unborn, is a parentless babe of wisdom. Wondrous is this. Being non-created, it is natural wisdom. Wondrous is this. Not having known birth, it knows not death. Wondrous is this. Although it is total reality, there is no perceiver of it. Wondrous is this. Although wandering in the samskara, it remains undefiled by evil. Wondrous is this. Although seeing the Buddha, it remains unallied to good. Wondrous is this. Although possessed by all beings, it is not recognized. Wondrous is this. Those not knowing the fruit of this yoga seek other fruit. Wondrous is this. Although the clear light of reality shines within one's own mind, the multitude look for it elsewhere. Wondrous is this. What I love about that one in particular is the fact that you don't see it is still wondrous. So both the knowing of it and the not knowing of it is equally wondrous in the cosmic dance. Are there any more comments so far?
Is it possible to conclude that what Uspensky is talking about, self-remembering, is to this self, as you are explaining, oneness, overall, one cosmic dance? Is it inferable to conclude?
Yeah. Mr. Uspensky, what he was trying to describe, but no one really understood what he was talking about, was recalling that behind it all, you're not what you appear to be. So when you experience yourself as separate, then you're in the world of dualism and you're in a world of pleasure and pain. But behind that is this ocean of total stillness, which is yourself. So, with Mr. Uspensky's word self-remembering, it was all about just recalling this deeper sense of yourself, which is universal and is ever present and doesn't need to be created and is already looking out through your eyes right now, rather than the identity being in either the body or the psyche. When your sense of self is in body or psyche, then you suffer or experience pleasure or pain according to how the movie goes. So what he was trying to get people to do was recall this deeper sense of self which witnesses rather than experiences. To answer it at all. I've got a sort of thing I drew this morning. It's a shining book that I'll put it out to it. The only books appear since I put it up. Great, thanks. I drew that, actually I drew it this afternoon. Now, trying to draw a classic sort of journey of life from the beginning round to the end. And often in the first part of life you go through what I call a climbing phase. So in my case I came here when I was about 14 to meditate when I was 16. I gradually did more and more practices, and what I thought is if I meditate tons and tons and get up very early and be a whirling dervish and do the movements and lots of other things, then I'll be what I call sort of bombing up the ladder of liberation. Helen and I refer to bombing up the ladder. And particularly when you're young, that's a very attractive thing, because you think if I do more and more spiritual practice, then I'm going to be self-realized very rapidly. Enlightened. And I call that climbing. It's like a sort of climbing phase where you think, gosh, I'm doing really well. Like Miranda getting up at 5 in the morning to meditate. And what often happens is you're very sort of devoted, and you're a very good member of your particular school or organisation, and you're very diligent, and you're working away, and you're bombing up the ladder, and then often in the midlife period you have some great big life trauma, which I've drawn as an explosion. It can be all sorts of different things. It can be illness or bereavement or relationship breakup or loss of career or loss of home, or even all of them all suddenly at once. And in some mystical traditions it's called the via negativa, or the negative way, where you, rather than climbing, you now feel like you're sinking, and all of your very confident climbing mode starts to fall away. So what you were so confident about in the climbing and reaching this special state, in the letting go, you know about it, Schnuffy.
Dancing with Shiva.
Yes. It falls away, and you're left in a total state of not knowing. So in this bit you thought, oh, I know so much and I'm almost enlightened, and then boom, it all disappears and you're left, it's almost like a sort of complete desolation. Everything goes, and all your belief systems go, and all your knowledge goes. And then that can last quite a long time. It can go on sort of for many years. And then, normally after that, there's like a phoenix rising from the ashes stage, where you've let go of all your opinions and all your thoughts and all your models and all your structures. And something then, without you doing anything, seems to rise out of the ashes. And then happens what I call your bliss dance. It's almost like you have what Ken Wilber calls it, a new duty in consciousness. It's like you have this particular dance that you're here to do on the stage of life. And in that one, it's not about attaining anything. It's what I said about the dance just being for the sake of the dance. And it's almost like when you look back, it's like you've done nothing. The whole thing seemed to happen like watching a movie. So that's totally my experience there, and I've witnessed it in lots and lots of other people. And so me and Helen, when we look at people now, we say, oh yes, so-and-so's in the climbing mode. And then you go, oh no, so-and-so's in the draw breaking down mode. And then you witness, I normally, if I talk to people when they're in this mode, I say, don't worry, you're going to be absolutely fine. And they always are. Something unexpectedly comes from left of centre, and they find this new life opens up which they weren't expecting. But it's very different. It's so different from the rigorous practice and the climbing. It's almost more like a sort of outflowing. Okay, so that's model number 1.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
I love it. I absolutely love it. The only thing I would say is that for me, the first part of that didn't exist at all.
No.
I only started with it.
Yeah, you started with the trauma.
With the trauma.
Yeah.
And then in this second half of, where I'm now, I'm doing the practicing, the climbing, but also letting go. And I certainly rose from ashes, and I'm getting some bliss. It's all together.
It's fantastic. It will be different for different people. I was a sort of precocious child prodigy, so I sort of started back here somewhere.
I certainly wasn't.
People come in at different points into the drama.
But the boom and the trauma, I do.
Yeah.
You don't get to our age without it.
Most people's lives everyone will have their fair share of trauma.
Yeah.
It's often at different parts and times in life. But it's worth it for the bit that comes after it.
How do you forget what you had before the womb?
It sort of happens, in my experience, in the trauma. You don't actually forget it, you just sort of you move on from it almost. Something else emerges.
The notion of enlightenment almost is a joke among the spiritual masters who go through the journey. And so my question is, when they talk about ascended masters and stuff like that, what does that mean in this context? Because
I think
who ascended?
Yeah, ascended masters, I don't even know what they are. I think, from what I've heard, that they're sort of dead people, aren't they? If that means they've ascended. It's a sort of New Age term, ascended masters, I think.
No, and also in Indian philosophy.
Is it in Indian philosophy? How I'd understand it, without going New Age, is in the Macabre, when you turn in the ceremony, Helen and I have always described it as like a window between the worlds. So, for example, if you have a memorial Macabre for a dervish who has just died, very soon after they've died, it's like this amazing presence, which I can't describe or explain, comes into the ceremony. When Dr. Rolls died, for example, in 1982, the ceremony was absolute. He died actually during the ceremony. It was he was at home and we were all turning in the graduation ceremony, and it was like heaven on earth. I've never known a Macabre like it. It's almost like you were standing still, yet you were turning, and the room was just fit with love. And I've known that in a number of, when other dervishes die, it's like something suddenly comes into the ceremony. And in the centre line in the Macabre, in the Samahani, which is what you call that circular turning space, where only the sheikh is meant to walk, it's almost like all sheikhs and all past dervishes walk that centre line. And Helen will vouch for this also, but often in a ceremony you'll feel the presence of a particular sheikh or dervish who's died. So I don't understand ascended masters, but I do understand how you can very strongly, in the ceremony, feel the presence of dervishes who have gone beyond. So it's almost like, that's why I say the ceremony is a window between the worlds. It's looking both ways, and you can feel people who have died very strongly present in the ceremony.
We all felt this strongly for Willem.
Yeah, because one of our last shape before me died quite recently, so we had a nice memorial for him.
I did today actually felt someone's present in
Yeah.
the landing.
Yeah.
And I almost wanted to turn slower just to check maybe there is someone standing there, but there was no one. And it's so interesting that you're saying this, because I could swear that there was someone there.
It's often like that with that landing door, the door you turn by.
Yes.
It's sometimes like Mr. Reserby or Dr. Rolls are standing there, I find.
Oh, God.
So that's about as far as I can go on ascended masters. But it's sort of, your model of reality is how far you go back in the chain of causality. Because if you go back far enough, everything is one, everything is the same, everything is the one consciousness. But in Indian philosophy they have a concept which they call the dervishes, which means a personification of the one consciousness. So some people find it very difficult to understand the concept of oneness, so they have a symbol of oneness, which for Christians it's a symbol of Jesus, and in Islam it's Muhammad. And in the Mevlevi tradition, partly Rumi plays the example of the Devarista. And in Indian philosophy you have all the different gods like Vishnu and Shiva and Krishna and others, and they're all like symbols of the oneness. So you can identify and worship the symbol, or you can say, let us pray for Mevlana, which means let us pray for Rumi. But what it really is you're just remembering the oneness, which is the totality, but through this symbol of an individual.
So what is that love affair between Rumi, and he was always in love with this notion of Shams? So there's still duality within this.
The love affair is sort of, you can understand it on many different levels. If you have a great teacher as your teacher, I had Dr. Earls and I thought he was a great teacher because he emanated something. Then you have this great sort of love for them. And as I heard him say once, when your teacher dies, it's as if he's never died, because the next person stays in contact with him. So you get this great sort of bond of love at the level of the drama, at the level of manifestation. So at the level of manifestation, it's a world of multiplicity, apparently. So we fall in love and we fall out of love and we fight and all these different things happen. But behind it all is this just total oneness. So with Rumi and Shams, my understanding of that would be it's the love you have for your teacher. When no one actually shows you anything or even tells you anything new, a real teacher just uncovers and reminds you of what you already know. So then, in the case of me and Dr. Earls, I felt this amazing love for him. And when he died, I didn't feel unhappy at all. It was just like this huge release of love. And it wasn't like he ever went anywhere. So, with Rumi, his real thing was merging with the beloved. And the beloved, in his language, was his own true identity. So it was merging totally with the oneness which was looking out through his eyes. So that's why Shebi Aris, the night of his death, is described as his wedding night, because it was a night of total union with his true self, wasn't it, Schnuffy? You naughty cat. Here's another metaphorical journey here, which again is universal to most traditions. And this is like a sort of process through life. And you can just as well put this in a circle, like my explosion diagram. But for convenience, I got it in a straight line. And it's almost, again, it's like the circular journey of life, of how you are already the total unity, and you go off, as in the Baghdad to Cairo journey, and have this great adventure. And for those of you who are brought up Christians, it's also the parable of the prodigal son who goes off and loses all his stuff and then returns. So in all different traditions you get this metaphorical circular journey. And when you're a little baby, when you're first born, so the science of psychology says, is that you experience yourself as a total unity. You don't yet differentiate between yourself and your siblings, or yourself and your parents. And it's a very unconscious unity, because there's very little empathy at that level. Babies don't suddenly wake up in the middle of the night and think, I'm not going to cry because I don't want to wake you up. So it's rather so it's unempathetic unity. So it's I am everything, but I called it pre-rational unity of a baby. So that's when you're like, when you're a little baby. And as life goes on, you gradually start developing a sense of being a separate something. So that's, in Latin you call it ego, which means I. So you develop this sense of you're separate from your siblings, and you're separate from your parents. And that's a learned experience. You gradually learn it, just like you, Schnuffy. So, and that needs to happen in order for the dance of manifestation to take place, and in order for you to relate to other people in the cosmic drama. You need a good sense of a separate ego. You need a good strong ego, and you need a good strong sense of separate identity in order to function properly. If you don't develop that at that level, then you end up with deep psychiatric problems, so something goes wrong in your process. So that's really important. The downside of being a separate ego is, as I mentioned, you then enter a world of pleasure and pain, because you're relating to lots of other separate egos, and some of them you won't like at all. What are you up to, Schnuffy? I've already done that. You little scamp. You little scamp, Schnuffy. The other thing which is wonderful about this is, in life, your I am something changes all the time. So when you're 5, you sort of think, I am 5, and I go to school, and I'm a little boy. And that I am something is altering all the time as you go through life. Then later on you suddenly say, oh, I am an old man, or I'm an artist, or... So there's multiple I am somethings there, and I would almost call, at one level, say it's part of it is your tribal identity. And just as practical illustration, in history at the moment, we're in a period where suddenly people's tribal identities have become quite strong, and a lot of people are getting angry with other people with different tribal identities, and that's all happening at the level of I am something, which isn't actually a real thing. So it's interesting. It's just something which happens within the dance of life, and people's identities can become very stuck at that level. And it's also, Eckhart Tolle referred to something he calls the pain body, which is when you identify your sense of self with some traumatic event which has happened to you, and then you relate to life and other people through this sense of identity with your pain, and that becomes a great limitation. So he refers to it as the pain body, and it's only a limitation because you don't have so much fun in life when you're identifying with pain. So you often meet people who, for instance, have got a chip on their shoulder and are always relating through this particular trauma they've had. So a lot of the work we do here, particularly in the ceremony and in the training and in the dervishing, is dissolving the trauma, which also becomes locked in the body, physical body, relating from past trauma. So that will happen quite a lot in your turning training. Particular things will emerge, and you'll see that they're locked often in a particular physical posture or form. So that's I am something. So that's necessary, totally necessary for the great movie. And it's a realm of separate self, and it's the realm of pleasure and pain. As you go through life, the cycle of pleasure and pain can get a bit boring, and you want to find something beyond pleasure and pain. So often at that point you start to look inwards, and it's almost like there's something behind your eyes which was there when you were 5, and it's exactly the same when you're almost 65. The same thing is just looking out, whereas this identity is changing all the time. There's something behind your eyes which doesn't change, and that's sometimes referred to as beingness or presence. And often when you look inwards, it's almost like there's nothing there at all. It's like there's a great empty void. It's what the Buddhists refer to as sunyata, or voidness. And I've called that I am nothing. So it's like you thought you existed, you thought you were this separate ego, and then you look behind it and it's like there's this great ocean of emptiness. And that's I am nothing. And some philosophers get stuck at that point, particularly one or two of the recent Neo-Advaitin teachers, because it can become a very nihilistic view of life, that nothing's of any importance, there's nothing, it's just very nihilistic. And it can also end up, if you get stuck there, people are quite cruel to other people, because they say nothing's important and nothing matters. And so what that's like is, it's like when you're in this part, the I am something, it's like you have your I am something identity at the foreground, and I am the presence is almost in the background. What happens in your journey of life often is there's a switch over and the background becomes the foreground. So it's like presence becomes the main thing in the foreground. And what you'll notice then is that everything you're experiencing, every sensation, every perception is actually not external as you originally thought it was, but it's all taking place within this presence, which is yourself. So everything you experience, everything you see, everything you hear, at first it appears to be going on out there, but then you notice that it's actually taking place within yourself, within your own presence. And that's, you then see that the whole visible universe is actually taking place within you. And that's very different. You've sort of gone back to I am everything, but in this case it's very empathetic. So you realise that everyone else is exactly that same presence as you are. Everyone is the same presence dancing, and it's full of empathy. So it's like this circular process of life, of going through the separate identities, then into the deep stillness that lies behind the separate identities, and then noticing that all the visible universe and everything you experience is contained within that presence that is yourself. And then again, it's like what I call the bliss dance, when your particular talents and your dance really takes off and really happens. And that's about it, for starters. Any questions on that? Well, I've got a great story to read you. While you're thinking about what to say, I'll read you a story.
Can I just ask one more question?
Yeah.
Sorry, got a lot of questions. So is this a necessary part of human life to go through this, or is it just happens to some people and some people just don't experience it in their life? Because many people live their lives without even hearing about any of this.
Yeah, I think it happens in different ways for different people, because time is such a peculiar thing. So for some people, a lot of deep experience happens on their deathbed. Other people, it sort of starts much earlier on, but most people go through roughly the same sort of type of experience and the same amount of trauma and at different times in their life. So it's very difficult to judge another person's process or what another person's going through, because you only know your own process at first hand. So I've seen people who are often very fixed in their ideas, and then there's an awful lot of letting go happens just in the last few days sometimes. But for them it's not like the last few days, it's like time expands and it's almost a whole lifetime. So it's difficult to judge anyone else's experience, so you always have to go on what you've experienced.
Is it fair to say we are experiencing death before dying?
Yeah, that's the Sufi. The Sufi saying is die before you die, so you will not experience death. And what that means, in my understanding, is while you're alive, realise that you're not just that level, you're not just your separate identities. I'm not just Philip, I'm not just a man, I'm not just an artist, I'm not just a dinosaur hunter. I'm something behind that, which is the pure, what you might call beingness or I amness. And the more, all you have to do is just notice that. You don't have to create it. It's already fully there, looking out through your eyes. It's listening at the moment. In my case, it's talking. And just notice it. Notice the I am. Contemplate just the pure beingness which lies behind form and identity. And then it's almost like you become illuminated before you die. So it's like often on people's deathbeds you see this great illumination, and in the process of dying there are these different stages people go through, which we can talk about another day. But in the final stage it's like you already are the great light, and then it's like you've died already. So if that's really the meaning of die before you die, then you will not taste death. Is die to your sense of being solely a separate self. You have to be partly a separate self to dance in the drama of life. But if you're solely that, if you're completely identified with your roles in life, then life's very tough, and growing old is tough, isn't it, Schnuffy? And dying is tough. But if you've taken time to access and acknowledge what lies behind it, which is just your basic sense of aliveness or beingness, then hopefully at the moment of death you won't notice it, because you already are it. Can I read you a story? This is a great story. What I love about this story, it sort of illustrates that in a way, and it sort of tells you that you don't actually have to worry about your life, because it's all taken care of, and all the bits that you thought were separate and irrelevant are actually all part of the whole thing. So here we go. It's an old Greek folk tale. There is an old Greek folk tale that illustrates this same process, how difficult it is to judge the events of our lives in isolation, without seeing the whole picture. The story tells of a girl called Fatima, who was the daughter of a prosperous spinner. One day, while she was travelling near Crete with her father, their ship was wrecked, and she was washed up on the shore, quite destitute. She was eventually found by a family of cloth makers, who took her into their home and taught her their craft, and she became quite happy with her lot. One day, however, when she was on the seashore, she was kidnapped by a band of slave traders and sold into slavery in Istanbul. Her world had collapsed for a second time. She was bought by a man who made masts for ships. She worked hard for him and learned the art of making masks, and so Fatima became happy in her third career. One day she had to go with a cargo of ship's masts to Java, but the ship was wrecked by a hurricane off the coast of China, where Fatima was washed ashore. Once again her world had collapsed, and she cursed her fate, wondering why all these unfortunate things happened to her. Now it so happened that there was a legend in China that one day a woman would arrive who would be able to make a tent for the emperor, as nobody in China could make tents. When Fatima was washed ashore, it was the time when heralds travelled around China to see if any strangers had arrived who could make a tent. So Fatima was taken before the emperor. "Can you make a tent?" he asked her. "I think so," she said. She asked for rope, but there was none. Remembering her time as a spinner, she made rope from flax. She asked for stout cloth, but there was none. Remembering her time as a cloth maker, she was able to make stout tent cloth. Then she needed tent poles, but there were none in China. So remembering her time as a maker of ship's masts, she made tent poles, and remembering all the tents she had seen on her travels, she made a tent. The emperor was so pleased that he offered Fatima the fulfillment of any wish. She chose to stay in China, where she married a handsome prince and lived in happiness till the end of her days. Thus Fatima realized that what appeared to be ill fortune was actually a necessary stage in finding her true happiness. And that's just what it's like in my experience.
Isn't it a bit similar to the story of the alchemist by Coelho?
Yeah, that story was just, he copied Rumi's Baghdad story, and he rewrote it as a whole book.
Right. It's along these lines, isn't it?
That's probably enough from me now. You'll go home if you want to.
Thank you.
And play with Schnuffy. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Then we meet on Tuesday, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, next class Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's good having you here, Schnuffy.